Have you ever found yourself staring at someone you love, gripped by the sinking feeling that your whole world is a lie? That the people closest to you, the ones you trust most, might be hiding secrets big enough to pull your life apart? That's where my journey began. A journey so tangled in heartbreak and betrayal. I can barely believe it happened to me. Truth isn't supposed to hurt this much. It isn't meant to dig into your soul and twist everything you thought you knew. But some truths do exactly that. I'm Pedro Rodriguez, and I want to share my story with you. Not because I've healed from it all, but because maybe, in sharing, I'll help someone else survive their own storm. They say life tests you when you least expect it. But nobody warns you about the kinds of tests so vicious that you're left questioning everything. Your choices, your sacrifices, even your love. 5 years ago, if you'd told me the roads I'd walk, including the ones through despair and loneliness, I'd have laughed and walked away, thinking my path was already set. But the universe doesn't ask for directions. It throws you straight into the chaos, strips away your illusions, and demands you find yourself all over again. Before we go on, I ask one thing. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below. This story is for anyone searching for hope in the middle of loss. It started, as it does for so many, with youthful dreams and naive confidence. Back then, I was married to Christine, the woman I was sure would be beside me forever. Christine wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant. Her dark skin shimmered under sunlight. Her smile could ignite warmth in the coldest of days. Her laugh filled rooms and banished the bleakness of poverty. We were young and full of grand ambitions, despite the tiny apartment and constant tension that came with living on the edge of financial ruin. But we promised each other we'd chase the American dream together. Those first years with Christine were tough, but we clung to hope like it was oxygen. Every paycheck seemed to vanish before we could savor it. Rent, groceries, electricity, it never felt like enough. But love gave us a kind of wealth that bills couldn't touch. We made plans for the future. A cozy house with a white picket fence, children playing in a backyard filled with laughter. When our son Mavis was born, all those dreams crystallized into a single moment. The tiny fingers of a newborn wrapping around my finger, his big brown eyes looking to me for everything. From the instant I first held Mavis, I swore I'd give him a life better than my own. I'd trade every comfort, every luxury to protect him and keep him safe. He was my heart outside my body, my reason to keep pushing through hardship. Maybe Christine felt the same, at least in those first months. We celebrated milestones together, each of Mavis's firsts. His first word, first step, first smile felt like miracles. But the relentless grind of survival soon started to wear Christine down. Her laughter turned brittle, her smiles stretched thin. She began spending more and more time away, claiming to be searching for better work. I tried not to judge, reminding myself that desperation can drive good people to make hard choices. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs, days in a massive, cold warehouse, nights cleaning empty office buildings. Exhaustion became my constant companion, but I told myself I was building a foundation for our future. Every time I came home to Christine and Mavis, I felt reassured that it was worth it. Then, one night during one of those relentless cycles, everything fell apart. The winter air was thick with fatigue when I dragged myself home from the warehouse, dreaming of the comfort of family and a hot meal. The apartment was eerily silent, a silence so sharp it made me flinch. I found Mavis alone, crying, neglected, and hungry, his diaper unchanged. Christine was nowhere. I started calling her, fear rising with every unanswered ring, my mind tumbling through worst-case scenarios. She finally picked up hours later, her voice cold, distant, almost as if she were talking to a stranger. I could hear music, laughter in the background. She sounded like she'd already left us behind. "Edro," she said, with a tone free of affection, "we need to talk." She told me plain as day that she was done. Done with me. Done with the struggle. Done with being a mother to a child she felt was holding her back. There was another man in her life now, someone who could offer her the ease and luxury she always believed she deserved. And just like that, with a few cutting words, she walked away from everything we'd built. Divorce papers arrived weeks later, each page a bitter reminder of vows broken. I didn't sign immediately. Foolishly, I held out hope for reconciliation, for Christine to realize what she'd lost. But hope can be as blinding as love. She never returned, not even for Mavis's birthdays, not for the milestones she once cherished. The moment I finally signed those papers, I became a single father, a title as daunting as it is lonely. Raising a toddler alone seemed insurmountable. Nights bled into days with barely a moment to breathe. Every dollar went to keeping the lights on, feeding Mavis, and making sure he never felt unwanted. Some nights, after he'd fallen asleep, I'd cry quietly, wondering if my love could ever fill the hole Christine left. Every day was a battle against exhaustion, against poverty, against the fear that I was failing Mavis in ways I didn't yet understand. There were plenty of moments when the weight of my choices felt crushing. I remember one blistering winter, our one-bedroom apartment cold as a tomb because the heater sputtered and failed. I wrapped Mavis in every blanket we owned, pulling him close, doing my best to shield him from a world that kept taking instead of giving. The public library became our refuge, a warm sanctuary where we'd read stories about knights, dragons, and magic. Mavis would curl up beside me, his imagination ablaze. "I'm going to be a knight when I grow up," he'd tell me, "and I'll protect you from all the dragons." In those words, hope flickered again. He was too young to understand why his mother was gone, but his fortitude put mine to shame. The resilience of children can humble even the strongest adults. Work became a juggling act. Construction by day, cleaning offices by night. I brought Mavis to my cleaning job more times than I care to admit, tucking him onto couches, checking over my shoulder as I vacuumed and mopped. The other workers cast judgmental glances, whispered doubts about my choices. Rodriguez, my supervisor, broke through the stigma, always telling me, That boy's lucky to have you. You're doing right by him." Those words gave me the courage to keep fighting through exhaustion and fear. But was I really enough? Was what I was doing truly right? The years drifted by in a haze, long hours, scant paychecks, fleeting moments of triumph mixed among constant worry. Mavis thrived in ways that startled and humbled me. When he started school, I felt a pride so fierce I could hardly contain it. Teachers praised his curiosity, his gentle nature. He picked up new skills quickly and tackled his homework with determination, even as I learned beside him, sometimes struggling to keep up. Parent-teacher conferences underscored my deep, conflicting emotions. I'd listen to teachers gush about Mavis's abilities, pride swelling inside me. But then I'd see the intact families all around, two-parent households, children dressed in clothes I could never afford, talking about ballet, soccer, and vacations I could barely imagine. Envy pricked at my composure. Why couldn't I give Mavis that kind of stability? As Mavis entered adolescence, the tensions multiplied. Suddenly, I was faced with a teenager who reminded me of myself. Stubborn, independent, and yes, distracted by young love and fleeting pleasure. By the time Mavis turned 18, I saw the first fractures of responsibility in him. He came home late, smelling of perfume and boasting about girlfriends with a swagger that masked insecurity. I tried to warn him, to steer him towards caution and accountability, but he shrugged me off. "I got this, Pops," he'd say, a phrase so familiar I sometimes forgot who I was really talking to. None of us know how lost we are when we're young. None of us see the dragons lurking in the corners of our choices. And as the years progressed, Mavis's choices brought new trials none of us could have anticipated. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Watching Mavis stumble through his first serious relationship was like reliving my own youth, but with the added ache of knowing that no matter how hard I tried, I could only guide him, not protect him fully from making mistakes. His girlfriend, Yara, was a bright, artistic soul with laugh-out-loud wit and eyes that sparked with rebellion. She came from a Haitian immigrant family, carrying dreams of her own and the burdens of expectations that pressed down hard on all of us. Their connection was electric, as if the universe had conspired to push their paths together. But when passion burns fast, it can also burn out, leaving scars behind. Yara and Mavis fought as hard as they loved. Their arguments echoed through our apartment, sharp words flying, apologies fumbling after each heartbreak. There were nights when he would come to me, raw and trembling, and I'd do my best to comfort him, to remind him what it meant to love with dignity, what it meant to respect someone even when you're hurting. I saw in them both a hunger for belonging that made them reckless. They were chasing feelings, each hoping the other could fill what Christine had left hollow. Time moved quickly, and soon their relationship had deepened. I worried about how much Mavis leaned on Yara, wondering if he truly understood the fragility of young love. Still, I kept my faith in him. He had survived loss before. Surely he could weather the storms of romance. But the truth is, every parent's hope is tinged with dread. We want our children to experience love, but we fear the pain it can bring. I watched, helpless most of the time, as Mavis and Yara tried to navigate the minefield of growing up together. That summer, Yara's family faced sudden hardship. Her father lost his job, and they risked eviction. The pain in Yara's eyes when she confided in Mavis was deep, an ache that only those who have known poverty understand. Without hesitation, Mavis offered to help. He stretched his savings from odd jobs, shifted his priorities, and tried to shoulder the weight with Yara. "We're a team now, Pops," he explained to me one night, his voice resolute but unsure. I admired his loyalty, but I couldn't shake the worry that he was taking on too much. Echoes of my own youthful mistakes ringing in my ears. Their bond was strong, yes, but stress began gnawing at the edges. Sometimes love isn't enough to hold two people together when the world is falling apart around them. As Yara and her family fought to survive, our home became a second refuge for her. Her laughter filled our kitchen. Her art adorned our fridge, and I found myself becoming part of her circle. Sometimes more dad than friend, offering advice when she would let me. Mavis was fiercely protective, always trying to make her smile, sometimes biting off more responsibility than he knew how to manage. I saw in their struggles the echoes of my past with Christine, hopes clashing with reality, young hearts facing hard truths. Meanwhile, I kept working, trying to support Mavis and offer comfort to Yara's family when I could. I didn't have much to give, but I'd share hot meals, make extra space, listen to their worries. The weight of being the steady one grew heavier. Sometimes, after midnight, I'd sit alone, staring at the dark ceiling, wishing for answers to questions I didn't even know how to ask. What does it mean to truly help those you love when your own resources are so limited? How do you offer wisdom without crushing youthful optimism? Amid all this tension, Mavis began to drift away, not just from Yara, but from me as well. He started spending more time with friends who promised excitement and escape, chasing moments of happiness that slipped too easily through his fingers. I worried as he took risks, sometimes skipping work, sometimes squandering hard-earned savings. But I understood. The pressure was relentless, and even resilient hearts need reprieve. Still, I waited, hoping the lessons I'd tried to teach would resurface when he needed them most. The community, too, became aware of our situation. Judgment was divided. Some offered compassion. Others looked down on us. The blessing, though, was in finding allies. Mrs. Rodriguez was an anchor in stormy times, reminding me that community strength can sometimes dwarf individual effort. It was her encouragement, her belief in Mavis and Yara, that often kept my hope alive. Through all these trials, I began to realize just how necessary it was to hold on to faith, not just in others, but in myself. The world tests us in ways we never expect, and survival often depends on leaning into those we trust. The struggle isn't just about enduring. It's about finding the courage to reach out, to receive help, and to believe that brighter days do sometimes follow the darkest nights. One rainy autumn evening, Yara arrived at our door, trembling and clutching a torn notebook. She had discovered something, a secret her father had kept, one that changed everything she thought she knew about her life. Her parents, she revealed, had fled Haiti under threat, leaving behind family and stories too painful to recount. Her father's shame at losing his job was layered atop old wounds and fears that haunted their family more deeply than any financial struggle. Mavis listened intently as Yara spilled her pain, her voice shaking with the weight of loss and betrayal. It was a moment that stripped away their youthful bravado, a moment when the harshness of the world split open, forcing them to confront realities bigger than romance or teenage rebellion. I sat with them through the night, letting them rant, rage, and cry. Much as I wanted to offer easy solutions, there were none. Sometimes the only answer is to bear witness, to hold space for grief, until it has softened enough for acceptance to seep through. The days following that confession were heavy. Yara retreated inward, and Mavis did what he knew best. He tried to fix what was broken. He helped Yara's dad look for work, drafted resumes, called old contacts, did all the little things a good man does when there is pain in his circle. And yet, wounds lingered. Tension built between Mavis and Yara, misunderstandings compounding the heartache. Their connection, once effortless, began to fray. I saw myself in Mavis, how desperately he wanted to hold things together, how much he feared loss. I realized then how cyclical pain can be, passed down through generations, bleeding from one relationship to the next. Mavis was reliving my own heartbreak, fighting against forces bigger than himself, hoping love could fix everything. Unfortunately, love doesn't erase loss. It only colors the pain with meaning, transforming suffering into growth if we allow it. It was inevitable. One cold night, after yet another argument, Yara and Mavis reached their breaking point. Harsh words were exchanged, old wounds reopened, accusations spat across old fears. Yara slammed the door, storming out into the darkness, leaving Mavis gutted and lost. I found him later, sitting on the porch, tears streaking his face, his hands shaking in the cold. I didn't offer advice. Instead, I sat quietly beside him, sharing the silence, letting the night stitch its own comfort around us. Mavis finally spoke, voice hoarse with heartbreak. Why do we keep losing people? Why is love never enough? I told him the truth. Sometimes the world delivers pain without explanation. Sometimes our choices backfire. And sometimes healing only comes when we finally accept what we cannot change. The weeks that followed were tense. Yara stopped coming by. Her family wrestled with their own struggles. Mavis seemed distant at home, barely eating, barely speaking. I watched, helpless, hoping he would find his strength again. I encouraged him to stay busy, to focus on work, studies, anything to rebuild purpose. Slowly, the light returned to his eyes, but it was a colder, more cautious brightness. Losing Yara changed him. It gave him a new awareness of the world's limits and his own. Despite the pain, growth stirred beneath the surface. Mavis began to speak honestly about his feelings, opening up about his fears and regrets. He learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, but strength. A lesson I wished Christine could have learned. Through this season of hardship, we became closer as father and son. Trust rebuilt, not in grand gestures, but in small, daily acts of kindness and understanding. We stood together, two men reshaped by loss, determined to honor the past, but also to find hope again. Time has a way of smoothing even the sharpest edges. As winter passed, Mavis and I found new rhythms. We worked together on household projects, cooked shared meals, talked about the future, albeit with a more sober outlook. The shadow of heartbreak lingered, but it didn't consume us. Instead, it sharpened our gratitude for each other, reminded us that family is made not just by blood, but by the will to stand together through adversity. Mavis started volunteering at the local community center, helping younger kids learn to read, sharing stories of his own mistakes and triumphs. He took pride in being a mentor, channeling his pain into service for others. Seeing him guide kids who reminded him of himself and sometimes of Yara helped solidify his healing. I watched his transformation with pride and humility. He wasn't just surviving, he was growing into a man who understood the weight and the power of compassion. Our home slowly filled with laughter again, cautious but genuine. We celebrated small victories, passing grades, completed projects, new friendships. The ache of Christine's absence still haunted us, but we learned to honor her memory by building something positive out of what she left behind. Forgiveness became a theme, first for ourselves, then for others. It was not about forgetting the hurt, but about releasing its hold on our present. Every day, I was reminded, life can be restored. Hope can be cultivated, even in the rocky soil of loss. The world may never offer guarantees, but with open hearts and resilient spirits, almost any wound can be healed. Life rolled on, as it always does, with change sneaking up on us in silent, unexpected ways. After what felt like a lifetime spent in survival mode, I began to notice shifts, not just in Mavis, but in myself. Days no longer felt like battles. The exhaustion of heartbreak faded, replaced by a quiet resilience. Both of us had grown, taught by our scars, but not defined by them. Yet, just as we found our footing, the past returned with a knock at our door, literal and jarring. One evening, as a cool spring breeze filled the apartment, the sound of a heavy fist startled us. When I opened it, the face I was greeted with was one burned in my memory, however much I tried to erase it. Christine stood there, older, thinner, her once radiant smile worn down by time. For a moment, the world fell silent around us. All I could see were her eyes, deep and haunted, and the tidal wave of history broke over me. Mavis saw her too, and froze. He was no longer the little boy who'd cried for her on sleepless nights, but a young man who carried the weight of her absences. The room filled with a tension so dense it felt as though the walls themselves might crack. Christine's gaze shifted between us, searching for forgiveness, or maybe for the pieces of herself she had left behind. "I'm sorry," she said in a whisper, her voice trembling, just enough to crack my heart open. The words hung between us, fragile and full of echoes. She had come to ask for a second chance, not as a wife, but as a mother, desperate to repair some of the damage she'd done. She spoke of choices she regretted, of the emptiness she found in the promises of a new lover, of the brutal clarity that can only come from losing yourself completely. I listened, emotions churning, anger, relief, confusion, and a longing for closure. Mavis said nothing, but his eyes brimmed with questions. I wondered, could we ever truly move forward if we didn't let her try to make things right? Welcoming Christine back, even tentatively, reopened every old wound. Suddenly, I was reminded of all those sleepless nights I'd spent worrying about Mavis, replaying every decision, doubting every move. Mavis, though older, faced a different challenge. His heart carried a mixture of resentment and yearning, a longing for the mother he'd so often needed, and the sting of abandonment too fresh to ignore. In the weeks that followed Christine's return, the three of us danced around one another with the awkwardness of strangers forced to share space. She tried to find ways back into our lives, tried to connect with Mavis through stories and belated apologies. He listened, mostly in silence, his expressions a shifting landscape of cynicism and hope. I caught him watching her sometimes, looking for the mother he remembered, against the reality before him. Christine sought my forgiveness as well, but trust is not rebuilt overnight. She helped around the house, cooked meals, volunteered at the same community center as Mavis. Yet whenever she smiled, a shadow crossed her face, a reminder of the years lost, of the choices that could never be undone. Our conversations were careful, measured. We talked about the past only when we had to, both of us afraid to reopen wounds too deep to heal in a single apology. Despite the pain, the process was necessary. Christine's presence challenged us to confront the uncomfortable truth. Heal slowly, with each shared meal and honest talk, Mavis and I carved out boundaries and began the work of forgiveness, not as a gift for Christine, but as a liberation for ourselves. Bit by bit, we learned to coexist. The process wasn't smooth or linear. There were setbacks, nights when Mavis slammed his door, afternoons when Christine disappeared for hours, moments when my patience unraveled. But with every day, something softened in all of us. Our routines shifted to include her, shared breakfasts, movie nights, neighborhood walks. Christine tried to piece together the gaps in Mavis's life. The first time he rode a bike, the scar on his knee from a fall I'd patched alone, the birthday parties she'd missed. Mavis approached all this warily. Teenagers have long memories. Forgiveness required more than time. It called for proof. Proof that Christine wasn't just passing through. Proof that she would stay, that she could handle discomfort, instead of running from it this time. She did her best to show up, to apologize without excuses, to listen instead of explain. Some evenings, she'd tell Mavis stories about her childhood, laughing and crying in turn, opening doors that had long been shut. For me, the hardest part was letting go of anger, the grief at what might have been, if only. But I saw genuine effort in Christine that she'd never shown before, and I couldn't deny her that. The community, too, responded. Some welcomed her, others remained skeptical, none forgetting entirely. But the slow rebuilding of trust within our fragile family became a series of small victories, each one a step towards the future we'd almost given up on. With Christine's return, our family was forced to adapt, to bend without breaking. Mavis, once withdrawn, grew more confident in speaking his truth, not just to his mother, but in every facet of his life. He confronted Christine about her absence, about the pain of growing up without her. She listened, tears running silently down her cheeks, and didn't try to defend herself. Her quiet acceptance became a salve for old wounds, proving to Mavis that sometimes the bravest thing is not to explain, but to acknowledge and stay present through discomfort. I watched as my son transitioned from boy to man. He took on new responsibilities, work, mentoring, helping neighbors. At school and in the community center, he became a leader, modeling steadiness and empathy. The adversity we'd faced had shaped him into someone capable of real kindness and strength. Lessons bloom. Christine, for her part, worked hard to become part of that process, cheering him on from the sidelines and learning to accept that forgiveness would be slow if it came at all. There were new joys, too. We celebrated Mavis's acceptance to college, a dream neither of us had dared articulate years earlier, when just paying bills seemed impossible. Christine beamed with pride, and even as I envied her ability to share in these milestones, I was grateful. Life had circled back in unexpected ways, giving us all a chance to heal. Forgiveness, it turned out, was not just about letting go of pain, but about making space for happiness despite it. As the years passed, the narrative of our family changed. What had once been a story of abandonment and survival became one of resilience, reconciliation, and hope. Yes, scars remained. There were days when forgiveness felt like an impossible mountain, when memories resurfaced and the ache of loss threatened to drown out the progress we'd made. But those moments grew fewer, replaced by laughter, by shared struggles, and mutual respect. I realized something essential during this process. Life isn't about avoiding hurt. It's about embracing the full arc of our experiences, learning from pain, and allowing joy to take root again. Mavis, now an adult, embodied this lesson. He spoke openly about our story, encouraging others in the community to see their own hardships not as failures, but as starting points for new beginnings. Christine became a volunteer advocate, drawing on her mistakes to help other mothers reclaim relationships with their children. Our home, once echoing with regret and silence, now blossomed with second chances. The journey taught us that while we can't control every twist in our stories, we can choose how to respond, how to love, and when to let go. In the end, our family found a path not to the fairy tale happiness I once imagined, but to something far richer and more real, a future defined by connection, understanding, and above all, hope. As the seasons changed and Mavis moved forward into adulthood, our household evolved yet again. Less like a battleground for past regrets, and more like fertile ground for growth. College opened new doors for him, bringing him in contact with mentors, friends, and causes that challenged him to think beyond his own story. He pursued social work, inspired by the hardships he had endured and the desire to help others who felt invisible or forgotten. Christine and I learned to coexist as co-parents and companions in healing, if not lovers. Our conversations grew deeper and more empathetic, filled with the humility that comes from facing one's limitations. There were nights when we reminisced about the old days, recalling silly fights and small victories between the heartbreaks. Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we grieved the lost years together. Both of us realized, maybe a little too late, that life was never about perfection. It was about showing up, not just for the easy moments, but for the difficult ones too. What surprised me most was how forgiveness rippled outward, touching not just the three of us, but our wider community. Mavis, bold and articulate, gave talks at local events, sharing pieces of our journey with honesty that moved others to tears. He spoke about poverty, about race, about abandonment and healing, weaving our family's story into the fabric of our neighborhood. Lessons bloom. People listened, not because we were exceptional, but because our pain and resilience were universal. In trying to break the cycle of hurt passed down across generations, we discovered that legacy is not simply what you leave behind. It's what you create each day, in every difficult conversation, every brave act of vulnerability. Our story became proof that new beginnings are always possible, even after the darkest chapters. The smallest victories often proved the most meaningful. The laughter shared during a family dinner, Christine's gentle compliments about Mavis's achievements, and even the soft, tired grins we exchanged at the end of difficult days. These ordinary moments were golden. They became our real inheritance, an unspoken agreement to try again, regardless of how many times any of us had stumbled. There were still moments of tension, times when old arguments resurfaced or insecurities reared up uninvited. We were, after all, only human. But the difference now lay in how we responded. Mavis no longer retreated behind walls. Instead, he voiced his needs, his love, and even his disappointments directly, and with surprising grace. Christine accepted that full forgiveness might never be hers, but she chose to continue proving her love through actions instead of pleas or explanations. As for me, hope took on a quieter, more realistic hue. I no longer dreamed of erasing the past or of idealized futures. I learned to cherish the hard-won connections in their imperfect glory. I joined community efforts with Christine, helping struggling families find resources, sharing the practical lessons and emotional wisdom we'd accumulated. through suffering and recovery. Well, that's our all-embraced moment of joy that always blossoms into more programs. We embrace our problems, joined together, helping in the community and creating something better. I learned to cherish the hard-won connections in their imperfect glory. I joined community efforts with Christine, helping struggling families find resources, sharing the practical lessons and emotional wisdom we'd accumulated. Years later, when Mavis graduated from college, the first in our family to do so, our hugs were tearful, proud, and a touch incredulous. We had navigated not just academic hurdles, but the complex heartbreaks and fragile joys that define a family's destiny. Every photograph from that day captured more than an achievement. They captured evidence that love, imperfect, unrelenting, hard-forged, can reshape even the most fractured stories. Mavis's success became a beacon for others in our community. He returned after graduation to work at the neighborhood center, advocating for children and families at risk. He drew from our story without shame or bitterness, using lived experience as a bridge between trauma and opportunity. Young people, faced with their own family struggles or feelings of abandonment, listened to Mavis because he spoke with authenticity, guided by empathy rather than judgment. Christine blossomed in her own right. Confronting her past mistakes publicly, she attended support groups for mothers overcoming addiction and abandonment issues. She became a confidant for women afraid to claim a new start. Her journey was rarely smooth, but through each slip and recovery, she modeled the courage to keep growing. Her life was a testament to the healing power of community and the reality that transformation seldom looks neat or perfect. I, too, deepened my involvement in our community's outreach. As I told and retold our family's tale to students, to single parents, to church and neighborhood groups, I hoped to normalize imperfection, to encourage honesty and vulnerability. Our story, once something I kept hidden out of shame, became a symbol of hope for others who felt trapped by circumstances. Together, we became a family others looked to, not because we had it all figured out, but because we'd learned to keep fighting for connection, for growth, and for joy after everything seemed lost. Years blurred into each other, seasons marked less by pain and more by traditions we forged anew. Annual community barbecues, shared birthdays, volunteers' holiday drives, and late-night walks through the neighborhood lit up with laughter. New people entered our lives. Mavis brought home friends of every background. Christine mentored other struggling mothers, and I found solace in friendships grown from shared hardship. As our family grew outward, the definition of home changed, becoming less about four walls and more about belonging wherever we stood together. We made peace with the past, letting gratitude speak louder than regret. There were still bittersweet anniversaries, reminders of the hard years when anger and silence ruled. But even these became soft with time, teaching us the gentle art of letting go. On long summer evenings, we'd gather on the tiny porch, watching children play in the street, talking about dreams old and new. Sometimes we'd fall silent and just listen to the city's heartbeat, the hum of hope, stubbornly refusing to fade. It was during these moments I realized that redemption doesn't arrive like a high drama. It's a slow, patient process earned through years of showing up, apologizing, forgiving, and laughing together. We'd become a family, not by pretending the pain never happened, but by loving each other honestly through and beyond it. As I reflect on our journey, its setbacks, its triumphs, and the deep, complicated love woven through every chapter, I see more than just survival. I see endurance, redemption, and hope. I see that the families who make it aren't the ones who avoid trouble, but the ones who keep reaching for each other when things fall apart. Christine is not the person she was when she left us, but her story proves that people can change, repair, and make amends even after devastating mistakes. Mavis, shaped by trials both gentle and harsh, chooses every day to invest his pain into purpose, his past into the service of others. I, too, have learned to let go of anger, of bitterness, and of the belief that I have to carry the world alone. Now, as our family gathers, imperfect, diverse, and full of stories, I am grateful. Grateful for the pain that pushed us to grow, for the love that taught us endurance, and for the hope that stitched us back together. We have learned that even broken beginnings can yield unbreakable bonds, that every ending is just another opening act for grace and second chances. If you ever find yourself doubting that healing is possible, that forgiveness is deserved, or that families can't come back from the edge, look to our story. See in us the proof that the strongest love isn't the kind that never breaks, but the kind that chooses again and again to rise from the ruins and dare to believe in a brighter tomorrow.